Hi, Thomas Heimann here, coming to you from my home office for today's Real Estate Success 2020 episode. And today's episode has to do with team building. I did a few episodes before about team building and how to start a team, some of the consideration to take into account. Today, I want to talk about hiring for your team. And this incidentally applies to any kind of hiring. I'm using this strategy, this process still today for any corporate employees that I'm hiring. And I can tell you now with literally decades of experience as an entrepreneur, I've hired hundreds and hundreds of people. Anytime that I've violated this process, I ended up regretting it. So, the challenge when you hire for people, for team members, when you hire people, is that most people will run an ad, they will get some applicants, they will invite them for an interview if the resume looks okay, and then going to have some kind of connection with them. They're either going to like them or dislike them. They're going to create some rapport. And oftentimes decisions are made based on emotions and not based on if this person really is the right person for this role. And if you're going to hire a salesperson or an accountant, bookkeeper, or a transaction coordinator, or a creative person, those people will have very different personalities and attributes to be perfect at that job. Somebody that would be fantastic as a bookkeeper is not going to be a fantastic salesperson. And we don't want to try to fit a round peg in a square hole just because we now have this chemistry with this person. We really like them. We want to hire them. We feel they're the right person, and then they're not. So the tool that I have used now for, 20 plus years is the DISC model. And the process that I use is to use the DISC model as a filtering mechanism. So when I used to hire for my real estate sales team, what I used to do is group interviews. So I would advertise for a role locally, whether it was a buyer agent or a transaction coordinator or anything else, and I would organize group interviews. So I would invite people to come all at the same time. I wouldn't tell them that it's a group interview. I would just say we're having interviews at 5 p.m. And they would show up, and then there would be 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 other people at the time. I would have them fill out an application in person, and then I would have them all together in a conference room, and I would give my presentation, which was really designed to let them know in no uncertain terms what we're looking for this role, what my expectations are, and I almost try to talk them out of the position and really laid it on them in no uncertain terms. Here are the things that I expect, and nothing less will be acceptable, blah, blah, blah. And here's the upside. Here's the fantastic upside of the position. And then when they decided that this is for them, I would have them fill out a DISC model profile. And then I would have someone grade that, and only the DISC model profile that matched the opportunity would then come to my desk to actually look at the resume, look at the application, and decide if I wanted to have an interview. Now that was then. Today, obviously, the process is slightly different, and especially with COVID, it's you don't want to have any giant group interviews. So for the past couple of years, what my process has been that when somebody applies for a position, they had to complete a DISC model assessment profile. And I use the one that you can find on tonyrobbins.com. I'm going to post the link in the comments. It's free for the applicant to take. And then when you get the free report, you can click on a link, and if the general information looks okay, you can spend $10 and get the full DISC model and personality profile and assessment. It's a very comprehensive report for that person. So don't make the applicant pay for it, but I use it as a screening mechanism. Number one, I want to see if they're compliant. If I'm going to say, you need to go and submit this report or complete this personality profile, and then email me the personality profile together with your resume. If they don't do that, then I know they're not compliant, and I really don't want to go any further with them. Sometimes somebody might, email a resume, and I will not look at the resume. I might just have an autoresponder go back, I'm sorry, application is incomplete. Please resubmit together with personality profile. And so in all of my employment ads, and I would recommend doing the same for your team, I request a cover letter, why we should consider you for this role and what you can bring to the table. Tell me 2 or 3 things that you can immediately, bring to the table to have an impact. Number 2, a detailed resume with employment history and salary history. And number 3, the DISC model profile with a link where they can go to get it. So you want people that are compliant, and then use that DISC model profile again as a filter. So if you know you need a certain personality type, we're going to get to it in a second, what kind of personality type you need for different roles. When you need a certain, let's say you need a high I, and you look at the resume that comes through and it's a high S, then I'm just going to say, thanks for applying, but this is not a fit. Good luck in the future. And so you want to use that. Now, if you're looking for high I and it is a high I, then I'll look at the resume and I'll take a look at it and see, okay, will this make sense? And then I schedule an interview, and my first interview is always via Zoom. It's much more convenient for all parties. I schedule a 30-minute Zoom call, but I'll find out very quickly, usually during the first 3, 4, 5 minutes, if this person is a fit. And if it's not, then I'll just thank them, and it's just a time saver for everyone. And then if the Zoom meeting goes really, really well, and then their references check out, then I'll invite them for a one-on-one personal interview. So what kind of person do you need on a team? There are basically 3 types of roles that you need to fill ultimately if you build a traditional real estate sales team. And the first one is you need an administrator / transaction coordinator. Number 2, you need to have a buyer agent, 1 or more buyer agents. And number 3, you need listing coordinator / customer service, okay? So where's the difference between transaction coordinator, admin, and listing coordinator, customer service? As a team leader, your focus is going to be on building the listing site. The buyer agents are going to handle the buyer communications. But your listing coordinator is not only responsible for helping get the listing set up, but they're the ones that will stay in touch with the seller, that will call for the seller report, that will get feedback, will give feedback, et cetera, et cetera. So it is really a customer service role where they're interfacing with your seller customers and making sure that your sellers are thrilled with the service that they receive. The administrator / transaction coordinator, they are working a lot more in the background. They're still interfacing with a lot of different vendors to see transactions closed, but they're really not as much of a customer service role as they are on a detailed transaction coordinator role. And so the personalities, as you can imagine, for a transaction coordinator versus a buyer agent versus a customer service / listing coordinator role are very, very different. And you want to make sure that you hire the right person for the right role. And if you're starting to get busy, I would hire an admin first, which will increase your ability to get more work done. Then I would hire a buyer agent or 2 in order to help you maximize the opportunities created by your listings. And again, free up your time. Now keep in mind that those buyer agents are going to be on a 50-50 split most likely. So if you were making $10,000 on a buyer before, now you're only making $5,000. But of course, your buyer agents will be able to do a lot more transactions than you are, and follow up a lot more aggressively, do a lot more aggressive open houses, more frequent open houses, and so forth. So your buyer agent should be next. And then you want to have a listing coordinator / customer service person. During the very early day, your admin can wear that hat, but it's not ideal. So let's talk about the personality profile traits that your people want to have. And before I jump onto that, you want to understand what the DISC in the DISC model stands for, what it means. So D is for dominance, for domineering personality. So those are people that can ask for the close, that can ask for the sale. And so for some role, having that high D is very, very critical. Most team leaders actually are high D type of personalities. High I stands for influencers. So these are people that can influence people, that can create relationships easily, and can get people to see their point of view and move along. So influencers are great salespeople. They're great person. They're great networkers. They're just able to connect with people and create relationships and influence them. The high S stands for steadiness. So these are people that don't really like to change a lot. So keep that in mind, that people that are super high S are not going to be thrilled when you keep changing your processes and your procedures, because they really resist change. But they're very, very steady personalities, in the sense they're not job hoppers. So a high S is going to be for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years at one position. So you can have confidence, if you get a high S and put them in the right role, that they're going to be with you long term. And then the high C is a conscientious personality. It's also somewhat controlling personality, controlling in a sense of controlling their environment, not controlling other people. So these are people that are very detail oriented. Bookkeepers, accountants would be great high Cs. So high Cs are very conscientious, they're very careful, and they are very detail oriented. So obviously a salesperson that needs to be a high I and D is not going to be super detail oriented. You know, somebody that's super detail oriented and maybe super steady, they may be awkward with people, and they're not going to be making cold calls and creating relationships and asking people to make a sale. So the DISC is really a great guide. And of course, everyone has everything, but we're looking at what is the predominant, the highest value. And so for the admin person, you want to have a high C and a high S. So the high C is most important because you want someone that's incredibly detail oriented. You don't want people that are just going to not pay attention and make mistakes. So you want to have a high C person and a high S. So the secondary should be the S. And the reason that's important is because you want someone that's steady. This is one of the most critical roles. It's much easier to swap out a buyer agent, but to swap out an admin person is going to be very, very difficult. And so you want someone that's steady. You're going to take care of them, and they're going to take care of you, and they're going to be around for years to come. You want to find out, you know, what their goals and aspirations are, and make sure that you can meet that. So a high C and a high S. Ideally, the C a little bit higher and then the S. But they need to have a C and an S. If the C and S is almost equal, that's fine, but high C and S. Now, on the buyer agent side, you want to have a high I with a secondary D. So you don't want to be a super D off the chart with the I being less. You want to have a high I. I needs to be the top, because they're all about creating relationships. You know, they're the ones that are going to be calling on your leads, on your prospects. They have to, set appointments. They have to create rapport. They have to get those prospects to love them, to work with them, and make them feel awesome. And so you want to have a high I, and you want to have secondary high D, because they need to be able to direct them and get them to make a decision and move forward. You know, if somebody is just airy-fairy, super high I, but they're afraid to ask for the sale, then number one, they're never going to sign them to a buyer agency agreement. But number two, also, they're going to look at 17 million homes without ever, getting the buyer to make a decision. So buyer agents, high I, high D. Now, listing agents are slightly different. On a listing agent, if I were to hire a listing agent for my team, and you don't want to do that unless you really have such a high volume team that you cannot do all the listing appointments yourself. But a listing is really more of a one-time kind of shot, so you're not spending as much time as you do with a buyer, where you go appointment after appointment after appointment. So for a listing agent, you would want to have a high D with secondary high I. So you still want to have a somewhat high I, and be able to create rapport in that relationship and influence the person, but you want to have a high D, because you got to ask for the close. It's all about getting that listing, getting the seller to say yes. Now, on the customer service side, and a listing coordinator would fall into that role, you're looking at a high I with a high C. So you want to have a high I personality. that is going to love connecting with people and talking to people for whom it's not a chore to make these calls, but they really look forward to reconnecting with Sally Seller and making friends with her and reaching out to her and reaching out to the other agents and creating rapport with them and getting feedback and so forth. But at the same token, they also need to be detail oriented. So you want to have a high I with a high C. So again, the process that you want to employ in a perfect world is one where you have a filtering mechanism in place. So when I run my ads again, and there are service providers that will collect a disc model as part of the application process, but it's fairly expensive, and I just prefer to have that built-in compliance check. So if you read the description for the job, and it's going to say at the bottom, application instruction, please go to tonyroberts.com/XYZ, and I'm going to give you the exact URL and do a disc model profile, which is free, and then email that disc model profile along with a cover letter and a resume. And if they don't do that, if they send a resume without a cover letter, or they don't send the disc model, then either ignore it or just reply and say, I'm sorry, your application was incomplete. If you want us to consider your application, please do X, Y, Z. So you don't want to get even started with that path of looking at someone's resume, and their resume is a sales piece, it's like a sales letter. So they're making it awesome. You're like all excited. Oh my God, this person is so freaking amazing. And now they're running the show. They're telling you how you're supposed to run your process as opposed to the other way around. And then you end up, having a meeting with them. You really like them. They have a great personality. Maybe they're awesome at establishing rapport, but they just have totally the wrong personality for what you need to have done. And then you're going to make a fateful hiring mistake. The worst thing it can do is hire the wrong person, because the time it takes to not only find the person, then you got to train the person and realize that, this person is not the right fit. And then maybe, you're already moving on. You're so busy, so you can't even fathom to let the person go. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse. At some point, you got to let them go. And then, you have to start all over again. Plus that person did a substandard job in a sense that the right person would have provided better service, better output, would have gotten more done, would have made your customers happier. So I highly recommend you follow that process. So again, job ad, requirement, including disc model, filter based on disc model. If it has the right DISC for that role, then an interview. I recommend doing Zoom. And then after that, maybe an in-person interview. And the beautiful thing today, of course, is you can hire someone in Hawaii to work for you. They don't have to be next to you. All of our employees are working remotely. So you could, create a much bigger, casting of a net to find people. And so maybe you won't have an in-person interview, just have online interviews. I hope you got something out of this. If you like this information, please subscribe to the YouTube channel where you saw this. Click on the subscribe button, the little alarm bell. And if you saw this on Facebook, please follow me. And I would love to see your comments. Please share with me what works for you, what doesn't work for you. If you agree, disagree, I'm open to anything. And I'm just sharing with you my experience now going back as an entrepreneur, hiring a lot of people, going back literally to about 1992, 1993. So I've been doing this for a long time. And so hopefully you got something out of this. I'm Thomas Heimann. Thank you so much for taking the time. Until we meet again.